I mean, the first thing to say is that Rites of Spring did not approach their shows as an entertainment event or you know, let's put on a show. It was like everything seemed to be on the line. One person I know once said part of their great power was that they played every show like their last one. And that was not just hyperbole because they would play with such abandon that they'd break their instruments. But at that point, it was like, you can't, it's not like later on, like Kurt Cobain smashing his guitars and he's got $1 million. So it's like, they've got a truck of guitars, that he can pull on. No offense to Cobain. But hello, and welcome to the DC Rock History Podcast. My name is Philip, and today we're talking about another classic. I say that a lot, but here's the thing, that's why we started this show. There are a whole lot of classics in the DC Rock catalog, and we're going through all of them. So today we're talking Rites of Spring with Mark Andersen, who is a longtime fixture in the DC punk community, who saw Rites of Spring, who has seen all the bands of the Revolution Summer era, who has seen Fugazi, and has continued to, probably more importantly than the bands he's seen, has continued to do great work in the DC area since he started Positive Force DC in 1985, an organization that combines punk music with grassroots activism. He also co-authored the book Dance of Days. He really did, I think, most of the heavy lifting in that book. Mark Jenkins came in with some of his notes and some writing advice, but I mean, you can tell that is really the spirit of Mark Andersen in that book. It's been a total indispensable text for us here on the pod, and we recorded all throughout summer of 2025 when things were really tumultuous, and they still are, and a lot of our guests are directly involved in that. So when we mention the organizations that they're a part of that are helping the city, please take a second, if you can, to go check those out and donate, or maybe best of all, donate your time. Okay, cool. That's enough rambling. Let's get to our hardcore history section. Rites of Spring, emo core arrives in DC.
Flex your head. It's time for some hardcore history.
Rites of Spring formed in Washington, D.C. in 1984. With a lineup of Guy Picciotto on vocals and guitar, Eddie Janney on guitar, Mike Fellows on bass, and Brendan Canty on drums. Several members had previously played in the short-lived band Insurrection, and their new project took its name from Igor Stravinsky's 1913 ballet, The Rite of Spring. Coming together at a time when the DC hardcore scene was facing burnout and division, Rites of Spring quickly became a focal point for a younger generation of musicians seeking to expand the boundaries of punk while holding on to its urgency. The band's emergence coincided with what came to be known as Revolution Summer in 1985, a moment when DC punk bands and activists, including those in Positive Force, sought to reshape the scene around community, compassion, and personal expression. Rites of Spring embodied this shift by infusing their music with themes of vulnerability and emotional intensity while retaining the power of hardcore. Their live performances were especially noted for their abandon, with Picciotto often collapsing on stage or diving into the audience, and the group playing with the sense that everything was at stake. Shows at venues such as the Wilson Center and Chevy Chase Community Center left deep impressions on those who witnessed them. In March 1985, the band recorded their self-titled LP at Inner Ear Studios with Don Zantara engineering and Ian Mackay producing. Released on Discord Records later that year, the album captured their raw intensity and has since been regarded as a cornerstone of post-hardcore and what would later be labeled emo. Though Rites of Spring disbanded in 1986 after recording the All Through a Life EP, their influence continued through their projects like Happy Go Licky and Fugazi, as well as through the enduring impact of their only full-length record. Even with the short lifespan and just a handful of shows, the band remains a touchstone. Hello, and welcome to the DC Rock History Podcast. My name is Philip, and we have an incredible episode today. When I say one of the all-time great records, I really mean it. Sometimes we overhype things here, but it's impossible to overstate how cool this record is, how cool this band was. We are, of course, talking about Rites of Spring, but before we get to all that, before we even get to our guest, let me check in with my co-host, Alex. How are you today?
I'm excited to share how I'm feeling today because usually I'm pretty exuberant, but I'm coming off the worst cold of my life. And
Oh,
I'm feeling kind of crappy, but I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited to be here with Mark, and I'm excited to talk about this record. I agree with you. It was a phenomenal listen. I enjoyed it from the top to the bottom.
love it. Well, I'm sorry to hear you're not doing well or you're on the mend. I've pulled a muscle in my neck, so between the two of us, we have one healthy person. We we can make up one fit host. But without any further ado, let's get to our guest. Our guest today is a legend of the DC community. You may know him and his work from Positive Force DC. Mark Andersen, welcome to the program. How are you feeling today?
I feel pretty good, considering we're under Trumpish occupation.
Yeah. So we have a normal uh like icebreaker that we'll do, and we'll get to all that. But this is going to be a relatively quick turnaround. We're going to put this episode out in just a couple weeks. So if you wouldn't mind, I'd love to just start right up top with the work you do with Positive Force and the continuum that's on. It goes all the way back to Revolution Summer and what was happening 40 years ago, which we're going to spend the bulk of our episode talking about. But I am kind of springing this on you, but would you mind just telling us about the work that you all have been doing for so long and why it is so vital to what's going on in DC right now under this horrible occupation?
Well, I guess the first thing to say is that music is really what made me become an activist. Music, particularly punk music, and I always felt from when I first started listening to punk, and I'm an old guy, so we're talking about starting with Patti Smith Horses in 1975 in where I'm from, Sheridan County, Montana. It was always about something more than music, more than entertainment, and it was a life thing. And life is not all about politics, certainly not, thank goodness. But politics are part of life, and thus it's always been part of being a punk as far as I was concerned. And the kind of politics that naturally flow out of my understanding of punk are grassroots, people-oriented, compassionate, creative politics that place a greater value on human beings than on profit margins. Um, and it was that music that drove me to first become an activist back in Montana. Speaking about when I reached college, I was in high school when I first was exposed to punk, but it's really in college where my kind of I reached a certain maturity in kind of my understanding of myself and punk, and that was how I expressed my punkness by getting involved in pressing issues. And when I moved here to DC, almost 10 years after I started in my punk journey, um, it was not inevitable that I would be part of the punk scene here or be an activist within it and within the community, but it certainly was a natural progression. And for me, Positive Force always had two sides. One is obvious that music can inspire us towards what's best in ourselves and in our world, basically, to encourage us, inspire us, to motivate us to get involved. And so Positive Force for me was always about that. It was emerging out of the punk scene of the mid '80s here in DC. And that's who were the people who, along with myself, who was a total newcomer, who started it. But it was something more than that for me. And that deeper thing was that I really felt like I had been given the gift of life itself by my encounter with punk. You know, the what it brought to me is really deeper and more important than anything I could say. I mean, words really can't express it. And by the time I was here, I was not that lost, lonely, alien baby teenager. I was, going to a fancy East Coast school, from very humble background, but going to a fancy East Coast school and, heading into my mid 20s and on my path towards success in an establishment sort of sense. But I came to a DC whose punk scene was legendary on one hand, but at that specific moment was in some serious trouble. It was kind of had deteriorated and become something kind of ugly. And in my mind, and actually there's somewhere in my papers, there's a paper where I actually sat down and wrote, this would be the end of '84, beginning of '85. And this gives you a sense of what a silly person I am in certain ways. I remember writing across the top of the paper, "Do my duty to punk rock project," and outlining kind of like some things I might do because, I was pretty bummed out by what I saw, and I you always have choices when you see things that upset you, piss you off, make you feel ashamed. You can just kind of put it out of your mind and head off in whatever direction, just leave it in the dust, or you can do something about it. Actually, there's a third. You can embrace the the darkness, but I skipped over that one fairly quickly. And I couldn't in good conscience turn away. And so really for me, Positive Force was about trying to bring something positive to the scene, a scene that was not that inspiring, at least to me at that time. And so it's just, on one hand, it's about the world and transforming that, in whatever small way, but it was also about, it was a very personal thing about trying to do something to pay back the debt I owed, frankly. That's the thing, because I wasn't that lost, lonely kid anymore. And there were, I was surrounded by folks who were, younger than me and searching. And so it was an idea to try to do something. You know, I mean, again, it's cliche positive. What does that mean? But something to bring some intelligence, some compassion, some hope into what seemed to be a fairly bleak moment.
Well, you all do great work, and I got to go to the Revolution Summer concert earlier this year, which was awesome. And then even just seeing on Instagram the things you posted, it has a real energy and a vitality that keeps me, optimistic or fired up in the right way, at least not doom and gloom. So,
Well,
thanks for
right
being
on.
up. Yeah.
That's what I would hope it would do, because that again, that's the gift of punk to me, and it's a gift that keeps giving every day. The darkness may come, but then you remember, uh, you know, got to have a purpose, as Strummer said, and you won't succeed unless you try. It seems simplistic, but when you're young, you, things that become verities for us when you're really young, like a teenager, they are not verities yet. You're still grappling with all this stuff, and you don't have a necessarily a set vision or path for life. And I mean, in some ways that's good, but to understand that you have power is really important. And so that's why, in terms of Positive Force, I realized I didn't say anything about what we do practically, but organizing protests, benefit concerts, engaging in service work with folks who are in need, uh, uh, educating ourselves, helping to educate others, and through all of that, the biggest thing, the bottom line thing is that we're hopefully helping to build community, that where we support each other, not because we agree on everything, that'll never happen and probably shouldn't happen, but because we have a sense of connection to one another and a belief in each other, and so we kinda lift each other up towards, our best possibilities, and so that's really what it's, about for me, and it manifests in a zillion different ways for literally thousands of people over the years, I'm sure, um, but that's the essential aim, and, we continue to do that. There's a big protest on Saturday. Members of the group will be there among many, many others, hopefully, and assuredly, given how upset our city is, understandably, over what's um, happening to some of our most vulnerable neighbors for no good reason at all, certainly not about fighting crime. Um, and then we're also doing a benefit concert towards the well, actually, before that, September 13th, there's something called Punk Black DC, and it's a celebration of African American creativity within the punk scene, which should be really fascinating. That'll be September 13th at St. Stephen's. Then September 28th, Sleepy Time Trio, Frail, Policy of Three, and Ultra Dolphins are playing a benefit for We Are Family, which is the group that I am employed by. We work in the inner city of DC helping low-income seniors. It also happens to be the day that we'll be celebrating the release of a Clash record, that will be a benefit for a couple of groups, one that will work with, helping to save immigrant lives, and another that fights for economic justice here in this country, the Poor People's Campaign. So there's all sorts of things going on that people can get involved with, and that's as it always has been, as always will be, and as it should be. The big idea, I think, at the beginning of Positive Force, and it rings true to this moment, is isolation is the biggest barrier to change. When we get connected to each other, pretty much everything becomes possible.
That's awesome. I wanted to start with that because it is so vital. It's so important. We'll have more time to talk about positive force, more time to talk about plugs of any other kind. But just while it's here, the time is now to be talking about these things. So, um, terrific. Let's backpedal just a second to something you alluded to, though. Uh, Coming to DC in your mid-20s, you said, and or your early 20s. What are your first DC music memories? Do you have a strong memory of going to a show, strong memory of going to a record store, anything like that, hanging out with musicians? What comes to
I
mind?
Yeah, of course, I got a million memories. One that has to be mentioned because even though it doesn't directly involve music, it's about the scene. I literally I When I moved in August of '84, I was staying at a friend's house in Arlington, while I was looking for an apartment, and, in early September 1984, I moved into DC proper, neighborhood right between DuPont Circle and Adams Morgan, basically, and it was a basement apartment that I was sharing with another of the students at the school I was going to or about to start going to. And I walked across the street. This is, of course, long before cell phones. I walked across the street to a payphone to call my parents back in Montana because it's fair to say that they had a fair amount of anxiety about me. I grew up 15 miles from the nearest town or paved road, so it's not even small town. It's literally country. That's where I grew up. And as I walked over, I saw that somebody had written something on the little shell, around the cell phone, around the payphone, and it said, "Nazi punks rule. Oi, oi, oi," with a swastika there. Now, DC punk, as I knew it from afar, was Urban Verbs, it was Bad Brains, it was Straight Edge, it was Positive Mental Attitude, it was Do It Yourself, Minor Threat, who I had not heard yet, but I had heard about and was fascinated by. I could not fathom how this could be here. And it was really shocking and upsetting. Now, it turned out it was just an indicator of some of the problems happening in the scene. But that's an indelible memory. I've shared that memory quite a number of times. Having you mentioned a record store though, and I have to mention the first time I went to Smash Records because I was down in Georgetown and immediately I was like, "Wow, this is a weird place for punks to hang out." But then I walked into Smash and it was like clearly a straight up punk rock record store done by actual punks. And what I remember is that the person working the register, who I later learned was Doug Caldwell, who was in in the band Lethal Intent. But I mean, and he was totally like spiked out and bullet belt and all this stuff. And he was talking to a young woman who was, or put more appropriately, flirting with a young woman who was similarly punked out, and they were not paying any attention to me. They were involved in their meeting dance, basically, and I'm just sitting there looking through the records, and, he puts on Fear, I Love Living in the City, and sings it to her as sort of a, I don't know, a mating call or something, and, yeah, I'm not gonna recount the lyrics to the song, but they're fairly graphic, and I just remember being kind of intimidated, but also intrigued because it was, I mean, again, it was the authentic article. This was not somebody like you could argue that a place like, what was around the corner? Commander Salamander was really folks from another generation, and they kind of hooked on to punk and new wave in ways that, it wasn't really their thing necessarily. But these are the actual article doing their thing, and Smash became a place that I returned to many, many times, as I did to Orpheus Records. That's where I met one of uh, my closest friends in the DC punk scene, Danny Ingram, who we're friends to this day, and he's one of our most loyal and hardworking volunteers at We Are Family. Um, so those are a couple of memories. I will share one other. Obviously, we're going to talk about Rites of Spring, so I won't share a memory from a Rites of Spring show because I think it'll come up later. The first really big DC punk show I went to was Wilson Center's show in January of 1985. And it's memorable in many ways, most of them, unfortunately, not positive. But specifically, what I remember is again, I mentioned Danny. He drummed in the band Madhouse, and his then girlfriend, later wife, and now ex wife, Monica Richards, was the singer for Madhouse. And I had seen them in a small club before that. I can't remember which one it was, but here they were playing with Marginal Man, Corrosion of Conformity, and Circle Jerks. So this is like a massive show, like 1,000 people maybe, and it's just jammed in this in the Wilson Center, the basement of this formerly a Presbyterian church in right in the edge of Adams Morgan, Columbia Heights, and Mount Pleasant. Um, and what I remember, and it actually follows nicely on both my memory of Danny at Orpheus and the graffiti, is that Monica made a remark, um, which I think was meant as an innocent joke about, skinhead girls. I don't know, it wasn't anything I wouldn't even remember it now if what happened hadn't happened. But, uh, at this moment in time in the DC punk scene, there was a skinhead gang that was kind of terrorizing the scene. And the skinhead girls heard a remark, not knowing that only a year or two before, Monica herself had had a shaved head. And so it was nothing, I don't think it was aimed at them. But they started hurling verbal abuse at her. And the male skinheads joined in. The stuff like some of the more polite stuff was, yeah, like, take off your shirt, that kind of thing. Show us what you got. Um, and it turned out, I think something about, it was said about something you need to get. I'm not sure if you want me to swear on here, but you need to get effed or something like that. Yes. And it turns out Monica was a victim of rape, and she had actually written a song about it, the song "Cut." And, I mean, it's an incredible song. It's never seen the light of day on vinyl. Some silly story about a dispute with a recording studio. It was recorded by Madhouse, but never came out, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I was there, and at that point, kinda bummed by the scene, including what I was just seeing right now, is like I was, like, horrified. This is a punk rock show, and they're hurling this sort of abuse at the female singer. Um, Although, of course, I'm new to the scene, I'm kind of further back, so I'm not right in the thick of it. And I didn't do anything particularly to prevent it, so I can't say I'm innocent. But anyway, what happened is that Monica, I don't know whether it was the song was meant to be played then, or whether she just told the band to play it, and she said, "This is a song cut, which is about r being a victim of rape, which I have been." And then they launch into the song, and, I loved Madhouse, and I still do, but there was a certain distance in what they did, quite distinct from, like, what we'll talk about with Rites of Spring. But in this moment, there was no distance. Monica was spitting venom, blood and spit and tears into the faces of these skinhead fools. And I just remember thinking, "This is incredible." This is punk. And then the song was over, and Danny Ingram jumped out from behind the kid and challenged the folks, and they all slunk off because most times bullies are just cowards, and they only do what they do when they think they can get away from it. When someone challenges them, then they're not necessarily so brave. But I just remember, like, I felt like it was a real moment of truth. Something really authentic and magical, although in a heartbreaking way. I mean, had happened. And that's the transformative power of music. It seems to me to be able to touch that deeply into each one of us, and bring something out that otherwise might never see the light of day. Um, so that's a memory, that I hold dear, and it's my favorite moment of, seeing the band Madhouse. However sad it was,
Mm.
it was also like, this is the real deal.
Well, thank you for sharing, and that it puts us in just the right place. You said it was January of '85, is that right?
It does, yeah.
Right. So
January
85.
5th, 1985, 5
Wow.
days into the new year.
And
And it
and
turned out to be the last show at Wilson Center for a number of years, which we'll
yes.
discuss about, 'cause that was not the worst thing that happened that night, so.
Yes. And I should have plugged this earlier. I read about that in your book, and which everyone should pick up, and it is a complete um guide slash Bible for us on this show, giving us so much information and backstory that we need. Dance of Days via Akashic Books. Pick it up now wherever you get books. But to segue into a little bit more of the history and Rites of Spring, that is 1985 is going to lead into Revolution Summer, which happens that summer in 1985. So this sort of um, you know friction among the community and sort of bad actors coming to shows is a huge part of what prompts the folks in bands mostly, or among others, to call for a reset, call for a bit of a palate cleanser. Again, in your book, it says people described, I think it's John Stab from Government Issue describes it as a like the spark was gone after Minor Threat. It's like there was a loss of innocence once Minor Threat broke up, and so that's where we kind of find ourselves with this record is after that and before what's about to come, which is, a whole bunch of new bands, Gray Matter, Beefeater, Fire Party, and of course, the band we're talking about today, which is Rites of Spring. I believe they form in the spring of 1984. Guy Picciotto, Eddie Janney, Mike Fellows, and Brendan Canty. If I mispronounce any of those, please correct me. That's my specialty here on the podcast, is mispronouncing names. But they're named after a Stravinsky ballad, "The Rite of Spring." And yeah, tell us more about what you remember about seeing Rites of Spring for the first time.
Yeah, well, the first thing I'll just say, and thank you for the kind words about Dance of Days. The irony of you saying it's like kind of the Bible or whatever is that from my point of view, I mourn all the things that we weren't able to put in. And because if you're writing a book and you're trying to tell a story, there's lots of really wonderful stories, anecdotes, different people, and so forth that end up on the cutting room floor, if you will. And the original rough draft of it was twice the length.
Right.
But you can't. I mean, except for a few, yeah, diehard fanatics, you will lose a lot of your audience. You won't be able to tell as compelling a story you know, unless you focus in. And so I know there's a lot that could be there that's not, and I'm so glad there have been so many other films and other books that have come out. And of course, banned in DC, Cynthia and
Mhm.
Sharon and Leslie's book precedes ours. Actually, Cynthia and I talked about early on about doing a book together, but it ended up becoming two different books, which was the right answer. I started about the same time, but I didn't finish at the same time. It was 15 years, which is actually good because the story was still playing out, and I also had to wrestle with some of the stuff to kind of be able to figure out what the story was. So you're trying to tell a story, and you're trying to move people, you're trying to be true to the scene, and to your own kind of understanding of it. Um,
Well, it flows
but
great. It's a really great read, and it does bounce. I mean, I feel for you because we're doing this, and we take it one album at a time, but you very gracefully move between what's happening in different bands simultaneously, where we kind of stick to one lane a little bit more. But it's really well done.
Yeah, well, and I was lucky to have Mark Jenkins working with me. Yeah, I did the rough draft on my own, but then Mark and I worked together to hone the final product. And he's a great writer. He was there earlier than I was. He's there from the very beginning, in a different way. Whereas I'm kind of more of a participant in the scene, and still a scholar of it, but first and foremost a participant. It's kind of the other way around. He was something of a participant, particularly early on, but then kind of chose to step back a bit and have a certain distance so that he could be an analyst of the scene. Uh,
Mhm.
uh,
He might even be a guest on on a future episode of this podcast. Who can say?
if you can get him, he can be an elusive creature.
Oh, it's in the
But
can. It happened. It was
he is
interesting.
he is very sharp and he knows so much that I was blessed to work with him. I was also blessed because the story itself is I think it's just an incredible story. And I just feel really lucky to be part of it and to be able to try in my way to pass it on. So back to the your question, Rites of Spring. Well, the first thing that I know about Rites of Spring is it comes out of what I've already said, which is there's a lot of things that are bumming me out in the DC punk scene. One thing I start hearing about is this band, Rites of Spring. And at one point, I thought I was going to see them because they were on actually a flyer for a Dead Kennedy show, which is actually a very unlikely place to see Rites of Spring. No offense, I love Dead Kennedys, but they're just very different animals. And I don't know whether that was wishful thinking on the show promoter's part or what. But anyway, the bottom line is I kept hearing about, like, people talking kind of hushed tones about Rites of Spring. Um, and you know, when they started, it's plausible that they may have first started playing together in late 1983, the very end of '83, not long after or about the time Minor Threat is breaking up. And actually, one thing I wanted to mention is faith is really important. Minor Threat is the super big band, kind of at the forefront of the scene once Bad Brains leave to New York City, and then of course break up at a certain point. But Faith uh, was was kind of the heart of that DC hardcore scene, and they, of course, broke up in the summer of '83. So there's a lot of things that are, at the heart of things that are falling away,
Does
and
their age
nothing.
have anything to do with that?
What's that?
Because Faith was, like, 3 years younger than a lot of the other bands, right? Like, they were, like, 15, 16. Was that part of
Yeah,
it, that they
well,
were connecting with, like, with kids their age or something?
yeah, I don't know exactly, but I think it was partly just the way they approached it. I mean, there's an interesting mix of people in that band.
Mhm.
Alec Mackay, obviously Ian's brother, younger brother, but also, very much an individual and very expressive, very intense, and thoughtful. Chris Ball, bass. Oh my God, Chris is, heart of fire, but a bit of a loose cannon. And then there's Mike Hampton, who is kind of the opposite of Chris. Mike is, whereas Chris, nothing against Chris's musicianship. He's a very good musician, but I think his thing was more about it's the spirit. And if you miss a note or here or there as you're losing yourself in a band, and that's fine, that's how it should be. Mike, much more reserved and especially as he developed as a guitar player, eager to play well and to keep growing, it's an uneasy mix, which is, of course, sometimes it's a combustible mix, it's kind of more accurate, but that's part of what makes a brilliant band, and then, of course, there's Ivor Hansen in the back, who's a wonderful drummer, and a pretty calm person. But out front, there's this mix, and at any moment it could go up, but it gives it a special power, I think. Anyway,
But at this moment, Embrace is not formed, right?
Embrace
They're
has not
still
formed, and
yeah.
and and that's actually one of the great sort of agonies for Ian because he wants, especially as he sees Rites of Spring. Ian Mackay, of course, who I'm talking about. Once he sees Rites of Spring, he's like, "Oh my god, I've gotta get out there and play again," and that's what Rites of Spring did for so many people. They would set them on fire. I mean, you would be moved to tears. I mean, again, it's a cliché, but it's also true. And the next thing you'd wanna do is get up there and do it, yourself again. Um and Chris was certainly the same way. I think Chris, both Ian and Chris Bald, when their respective bands came apart, they were a little bit at loose ends and, you know, walking through some darkness, maybe especially Chris, but Ian as well. And so they're watching this beginning, to explode. And they're seeing, of course, Beefeater and Gray Matter, who are so great. And then not long after, they're encountering Lunch Meat and then Mission Impossible emerging from this younger community. And it's all building up towards them getting back and in a band, which will be Embrace, of course. Um, and we can talk about Embrace later because it's again, in a way, it is the band most linked in my mind with Rites of Spring. Um, and they share a couple of qualities. Um, they share a not lasting very long, especially Embrace. But anyway, so I'm in this buildup of hearing this about this band, this mysterious Rites of Spring. And people were talking about faith or they're talking about insurrection or whatever. I didn't know who on earth these bands were, and they were broken up. So I saw the faith record, but nothing about insurrection. And so ultimately, I'm already on my trajectory towards Positive Force. We had organized what effectively is the first Positive Force public event, which is a benefit showing of Another State of Mind. And my daughter is invading here. Hopefully not, but hopefully she stepped back. Anyway,
Don't worry, we have a crack team of editors.
yes, thank you. So I derailed my train of thought. Oh yes. So I'm already yeah, we did that. Another State of Mind, which of course focuses a lot on DC in the film. Uh, and there's actually a story which at some point maybe I'll share, but right now I want to get to Rites of Spring, about how moving that movie was, or a particular part of it. Um, and then the week after, a couple big things were happening. Number one is the first public meeting of Positive Force, which was happening on June 15th, 1985, because we had done this event and other folks who were becoming part of it had made a fanzine, and we were all building up to this first public meeting. And I was also getting on a plane to Central America for 2 months the next day. Like, I think the 14th is the Rites of Spring show, 15th is Positive Force meeting, 16th, I'm on a plane to Central America, which is my first time outside of the United States other than being in Canada. Um, so I was really busy. And I remember almost deciding not to go because I kept being delayed and Beefeater was gonna play, and I really I wanted to see them and a couple other bands were playing. Um, and, but I was, like, about not to go, and then I remembered the awe with which people spoke about the band, and I was like, "Okay, let's just go." Which at that time is like I was down, DuPont Circle, Adamsburg area, gotta get to the metro, gotta go up Upper Northwest, walk over on McKinley to connect to Connecticut Avenue to the Chevy Chase Community Center. All the first time I had ever been up in that neck of the woods. And I came in and I came in and missed Beefeater. I remember, Tomas from the band, who I didn't know at the time, but he was totally drenched in sweat and laying on the stage talking to people. And, it's just it's a rec center. Still pretty low key and people are hanging out and I don't know hardly anybody, so I'm just being quiet. And then the band sets up and the band starts playing, and I mean, the first thing to say is that Rites of Spring did not approach their shows as an entertainment event or like, you know, let's put on a show. It was like everything seemed to be on the line. One person I know once said part of their great power was that they played every show like their last one. And that was not just hyperbole because they would play with such abandon that they'd break their instruments. And but at that point, it was like you can't. It's not like later on, like Kurt Cobain smashing his guitars, and he's got $1 million, so it's like he's got a truck of guitars, that he can pull on. No offense to Cobain, but these are kids, really. They're just barely out of their teens, and they're playing with whatever they've been able to scrape together, and they're playing like men are kids on fire. And I don't know any of their songs, so I can't sing along, other people are singing along, and, I I I don't remember that much other than being astonished by how they were playing, and just feeling, "Wow, this is I haven't been in this kinda space before." Like, certainly as powerful as that Wilson Center show was, this was something else. It was a whole different vibe there. Um, and then they were done, and I was properly impressed, and I was getting ready to go. Um, but the audience wasn't ready for them to go, and without any prompting by the band, and as I found out later on, this was the first time this ever happened. They had finished with the song End on End. Later on, I knew this, but At the time, it was just, another song where they were, like, just giving everything, like, spraying themselves across the stage and into, the audience. The audience picked up this, little, sort of "Whoa" kind of thing from the song and just wouldn't stop, and they just kept singing it over, and it was getting louder and louder, and, you could kinda see the members of the band. I mean, this is not a big rock and roll show, so they're done, but there's not, like, some backstage they've gone to. They're just, like, at the back of the stage or whatever, and you can see, like, the members of the band are like, "What's going on? What are we gonna do?" And that's how I felt. I was just like, "What's happening here?" I had never been in because again, it's you can say, well, now you can say like, "Oh, all these big bands, they have all these people singing along," and, it sort of becomes a show business cliche. Um, but this was not that. It was just something spontaneous that happened because people were caught up in the spirit. And I I mean, I was stunned and I was dazed and I was uplifted. And then, of course, the band comes back and, you know, goes into the song, drives it to a even more frenzied conclusion. And, you know, there's a beautiful picture of the Bert Kiros did of the stage as it looked after they were done. And it's on one hand, it looks like a scene of utter destruction. But what it felt like was an extraordinary moment of creation. And I walked out of there a different person than I had been when I walked in. It sounds silly, but it's true. And the thing to know is that, I was a huge music fan, but there weren't many opportunities to see live music, particularly live music by the bands I really love back in Montana. Certainly not in Sheridan County, but even when I went to the West, to the college town I went to, Bozeman, Montana, you know, later on, like Fugazi and other bands played there, but nothing like that when I was there in the late '70s, early '80s. And but since I'd been in DC, I've been to lots of rock concerts, and I'd been to, 930 Club and all these things, but this was something it was a whole 'nother level. And, and I walked out. I think that's the first night that Revolution Summer was discussed publicly because I think Brendan the drummer in Rites of Spring talked about it from the stage. Um, and I knew about it because I had become friends again, the record stores were so important at the time, and I don't remember if it was Olson's or Record and Tape Exchange, or maybe it was Record Tape and Exchange, then it became Olson's, but Steve Niles from Grey Matter worked there, and Chris Bald also worked there, and I would hang out there and I would chat with them, and, through Chris and then Steve, I learned about Revolution Summer, and I was actually totally bummed. I was, on one hand, totally inspired when I heard about it because I was like, "Oh my god, this is exactly what I was hoping for. This is exactly what Positive Force would be about." Um, that same spirit, like, "This is not over yet. We can take it further," it still means something profound. Um, but of course, I'm leaving. I'm leaving for 2 months. Um, but this incredible supernova of energy and possibility and I think most of all hope that Revolution Summer represented at the time and still represents, I think, it was there that night. And yes, I did go to the Positive Force meeting the next day, extraordinary life-changing thing, and then, off to Central America. Oh my god. You know, I could I could talk for a week about my experiences there. It was utterly shattering and revolutionizing for me to see, quote unquote, third world poverty and then the violence of that moment in Central America during the kind of the Reagan wars.
Well, what do you
But
say we jump into some tunes?
yeah. But yeah, so let me just bring it around, which is
Please,
the
yeah.
spark that I carried with me was the spark from that Rites of Spring show, and I carry it still.
I have more to say. I have questions to ask you, but I want to be conscious of your time, and
Please
so
do play some music.
we'll jump into some
Lest I
tunes, and
ramble
that
on
can be our
forever.
springboard. I love this is awesome. This is a day off for me.
I could,
All right.
and just to interject, Mark, it's really special that you shared, how that touched you in that way. And, for me, I think it's just really important for people to know that that's there for them and can be there for them
Mm.
in places if you seek it out. That isn't just a once in a lifetime thing. And although,
Absolutely.
yeah, it does exist. That's why live music and live art is so important. And I just hope people seek that out, look for that, try to be touched in that way, and you will be.
Yeah,
Hear,
be
hear.
open to it, and the you never know what comes or doesn't come, but if you're there, you're open to it, and you give yourself to it, then extraordinary things become possible.
Agreed. Well, let's kick off with we're gonna skip to the second track on Rites of Spring, Deeper Than Inside. All right, Deeper Than Inside. Just a classic. I'm struck by Brendan's playing. Like, even that early on, you can hear that, like, just distinctive, powerful drum sound from him that goes through, all of his bands. It's pretty cool to think about it in that way.
And he's an extraordinarily gifted musician and just a good-hearted guy too.
Absolutely. Now, I was curious if you could tell us a little bit. I imagine our listeners are pretty familiar with Fugazi live. That's probably the person who's listened to this podcast is someone who has also looked up Fugazi on YouTube and watched concerts and stuff. But do you have any memory of what it was like to just have Guy as the singer, to watch just him, because he's known for a pretty lights out performance, and you've sort of alluded to that already, the destruction on stage. But yeah, just curious if you have any thoughts on seeing him up there solo versus what he would be when he would be trading off with Ian in Fugazi. Maybe any similarities, differences, anything like that.
Well, I think as Guy went on in his career, if you want to call it that, on his journey, he became more and more skilled at expressing that totality in a way that didn't leave him broken and bloody at the end of the day. Although certainly plenty of Fugazi shows ended up that way, because
Some basketball
that's
hoops.
who he is. I mean, and that's what was beautiful about it. It's all or nothing. That's the true about the band too, which is why it's unlikely they will ever reform. Although not impossible, but it's they're going to want to do it 100% or not at all. And that, I think, is a beautiful thing, and that's certainly Rites of Spring right there. I mean, my God. My memory is that, Guy is not just trying, he is playing guitar, and he's singing, and he's giving himself fully to that moment, as in general the band was, but Guy is the focal point there. And in a way that and I think there was an abandon there that was tempered a bit in Fugazi, partly because, what Rites of Spring played 15 shows
Mhm.
total in their whole lifetime, and Fugazi played whatever,
Sure.
1,200 or whatever they played, over 1,000
It was a
certainly.
marathon, not a sprint.
Um, but they did so in a way where I never saw them playing and thought they were going through the motions.
Mm.
And I've certainly seen that with plenty of other bands, including, one of my big heroes, Joe Strummer, and one of his solo things, not the later stuff from the Mescaleros, but in '89 when he came through with the Earthquake Weather record. But anyway, and so what I just remember that he was barely in control.
Hmm.
And actually, the answer is that he may have been out of control and he was in the spirit, which is why I think people were so touched because that gave, when you see that kind of abandon or courage or vision on stage, it can lead to just sort of this uncritical hero worship. But
Mhm.
I think the punk response is to be inspired to step into that space yourself in whatever way you can.
Mhm.
And then hopefully after you leave the show to carry that into the world. And so, I once told another interviewer about that Rites of Spring show. The first one, now I saw them a number of times after that, but that first time, and by that time, of course, I knew their stuff, and so it was a different experience. And glad to talk about those shows, but um, what I came away with is not like, oh my God, this show. I will always look back to this moment. Like that's when my life happened.
Mm.
Oh, it's carry that into every day. Like try to
Mm.
find that kind of moment. It's not always going to be some ecstatic moment, but there's a
No, yeah.
deep, profound transformative energy out there that we can tap into, and we should always be trying to do that. I mean, I think that's for people who are genuinely on a spiritual path or even a religious one, that's what they're trying to tap into. But I think anybody trying to live a life that's deep and true and real, that's what you have to try to find your way to that vein of soul, if you will.
Oh,
Um, I
no,
don't
I've
know
been
if
to
I answered
shows
your
like that.
question very well, but
No.
certainly it was a different experience, and part of it is, he had really long hair, and a lot of them had long hair, and it was yeah, there was a different feeling there,
Mhm.
um, but, uh, it was also a different band, and and
Yeah,
and
sure.
and that's, when you start talking about, well, the 4 of them are together later on in Happy Go Licky. My
Mhm.
God, Happy Go Licky is a totally different band than, well, not totally, but vastly different band than Rites of Spring. It was a
Mhm.
band that was hard for me to watch because Rites of Spring meant so much, and
Yeah.
they, I think, were consciously trying to not be Rites of Spring,
Yeah.
to do something that felt real to the 4 of them at that time, and they were not, there's a moment where they're all kind of in the same space and they do these incredible things, but then there is some division that develops, and it becomes obvious by the last time I saw them, in December 4th, I think, 1985, their last show at Hall of Nations which is my God, what a titanic show.
Mhm.
All of Nations with Embrace, Beefeater and Dag Nasty in one of their earlier shows. I think Dag Nasty had started end of August, maybe August 31st, '85 is their very first show. Um, uh,
We'll get to that
and
on a later
there,
date.
it's clear there's something was where before they were all in that same space, it was clear that at least that night they weren't. And it
Huh,
yeah, it could have been just an off night, but it turned out to
huh.
be the last night of that.
Well, they're the ultimate lightning in a bottle band, emotion. I mean, even just recently, I saw something going around. People rated top, and we can talk about emo or not, but people rated top emo records from the last 50 years, and they're still at the top. And I only say that to say, I think this was a young audience that was voting. People still care deeply about this record. It speaks to people in the same way. Yeah, and it is that just urgency and that vitality that it still comes through. It sounds great. Of course, it's the classic combo that we like to see, recorded at Inner Ear by Don Zentara and produced by Ian MacKaye. That's, of course, what we always like to see on our record sleeves. Michael Hampton was also listed as a producer, and it just sounds great. I think things started, I don't know exactly what the turn was, but around 83, 84, certainly by this record, things were starting to sound so big, really full. Like Embrace has a similar sonic quality of, I don't know what they were doing at Inner Ear in those years, but the microphones were getting nicer or something. There was it just like really almost a stadium sound in terms of like the band coming through. I love Faith, and there's also a bit more of a flatness sonically. It's more like anyways, only to say that this record still sounds huge, and it comes through. But as we kind of wind down, I'd love to do you have a song that you'd like to listen to?
Do I have a song that I would like to listen to?
Yeah, from this record.
I mean, the song the first thing I'll just say is when I heard you playing Deeper Than Inside, it was hard for me not to be singing along. It was hard for me not to be jumping around. I tried to restrain myself, because, you're a respectable podcast and, not seeking physical slapstick humor, which is how it would have, I fear, come across. But
Hey, it could have gone viral. You never know.
yeah, not in a good way, most likely. But yeah, there are two songs that come to mind. As soon as I say that, then there's like 6 more that jump out. But for just with Rites of Spring, Drink Deep, and End on End, I think they capture something, and especially Drink Deep because it's, it talks about, in its way, you could see it as talking about how Rites of Spring approached every show they did. And it also could be a message for us about how we should approach our lives. And, it's not easy to do, but it is possible. And that is drink deep. It's just a taste. And it may not come this way again. I believe in moments, transparent moments in space where you've got to stake your faith. And that emphasis on like being here now and being real and giving it the ultimate, giving it everything, giving it all of yourself. That's Rites of Spring. And that's the best possibility for our lives, I think. And it can translate in political ways, certainly, and it also translates in very deeply personal ways. And that is, Rites of Spring. Their songs could be about the breakup of a relationship or about a revolution in process.
Here.
You get to
Well
choose.
said. Well, let's listen to Drink Deep, and then we'll come back, talk closing thoughts, and we'll end on End. How's that?
Great.
Love it.
Well,
All right.
well plotted. Oh my God, yeah. What a moment when Happy Go Lucky in their last show played that song.
Oh, really?
Totally surprised
That's cool.
everybody. And part of it was because you never believed they would do it. The whole point
Yeah.
of Happy Go Lucky was to, say that was then
Yeah.
and this is now. Although, of course, the song translates.
They're
Brilliantly.
Rites of Spring is just the coolest band. They're awesome.
And
That's my closing
I
thought.
have to say, I feel so lucky to have been there to see them. There are lots of bands that I missed, who I would have loved to see X-Ray Specs in their prime, or, Avengers, or, Clash or whatever. But that, being there for Rites of Spring, I wouldn't trade any of the other bands for it. And Embrace, same thing, the real deal. I mean, and again, the band was, Faith disintegrates, blows apart. Then Embrace comes around. What is Embrace? Well, it's Faith with the NSYNC
Just a
name.
different
I mean,
Mackay.
everybody in the band had grown in different ways, but they didn't
Yeah.
necessarily grown together. And then it became obvious. But again, it's just like, so what if they played 10 shows or whatever?
Mhm.
For anybody who was there for those shows, they packed a lifetime of meaning, of truth, of possibility in there. And oh my God, isn't that something to aspire towards?
Yeah. We're still talking about it today. But I can't believe it. This has been an absolute honor. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your stories, and just hanging out with us. As we wrap up, do you have anything? We talked about Positive Force, but do you have anything else that you want to plug or share with the folks? Again, pick up Dance of Days. It's awesome. Personally, I got it at the record store down the street, Crooked Beat. So
Another great story. If you're in there, and please say hi to Bill for me.
I will.
Yeah, what would I say? What would I say is, like, the moment is here with us now. And it's a different moment than 1985. We were dealing with, Reagan's second term. Oh my God, we can be nostalgic for Reagan's second term at this point in comparison to what we are facing now. I mean, not I'm not entirely serious about, like, I would never be nostalgic for. On the other hand, Reagan had some shred of decency. Trump is a moral vacuum, like the fucking, oh, sorry, black star that is seeking to draw everything that is good, the black hole in the universe, anything that's good in this country into, um, you know, Never Land, where you never see it again. But the reality, and this is actually the perfect thing I would want to end with, is, first of all, right now is exactly where we're meant to be. Whatever we need to do, we got to do it now. That's always true, is especially true right now. Second thing I would say is, however dark this moment is, and it is extremely dark. This is the worst political moment in my lifetime, and I'm old enough to remember as a kid, the Vietnam War, and Watergate, and that stuff, which of course was horrible. But this is a darker moment. However, it is not by any means the darkest moment that this country has faced. Think about slavery. Think about the Fugitive Slave Act, Plessy versus Ferguson, the Dred Scott decision, the destruction of Reconstruction after the terrible bloodshed of the Civil War, and the near century of legal oppression, Jim Crow segregation that came. I mean, I'm in the middle of reading a book about Charles Sumner and the build up to the Civil War, and oh my God, I I just can't imagine. They're fighting it out whether slavery is morally acceptable or not. And at the time, it was every reason to believe that the pro-slavery forces, the slave oligarchy, would win, but they didn't. And that's because people did not give up. People in their hearts knew what was right. They refused to let fear silenced them. They kept fighting, they kept working, they kept believing, even in the face of the most overwhelming odds. Far worse than what we face today. And what we face today is, pretty dramatic.
Stark.
But just
Stark.
as they were not defeated and they did not give up, we must not. And we will find our way to the other side. That's what I believe. I can't prove it, but it's what I dedicate my life to.
And we thank you for that. It's really good work. And again, we thank you for, sharing your time with us. This is,
Mark, you
really
had a
powerful
lot of
words.
You had a lot of great quotes. You had a lot of inspirational things. The thing that I'm taking away that really just stuck with me was your statement that the darkness may come and then you remember. I think that's something that we all have to take with us, especially during these dark times. Thank you for the inspiration to remember to keep stepping.
Yeah, seriously. This has been
Always
good for me.
Keep the music. Keep
Yeah.
the music playing, because that's, for me, that's a channel to the light. Always has been.
All right. Well,
Thank you so much.
speaking of, we're going to end with End on End. Mark, thanks again for being here.
Great
next
to
week.
hear. Thanks for asking me.
Oh, it is our pleasure. And trying to stop this, but again, let's see, maybe we have to podcast forever.
When one wave stops,
We're going all night.
wave ends.
We're going all
another
night.
Begins. End on end on end.
When nothing changed and nothing ever began. Restless movement in an empty room, gathering shadows of a darkened blue. And it feels so strange. It feels so strange when it comes again. Shackles of end on end, edges begin to blend. Time following time. A pattern becomes defined. I'm feeling from end to end. Tried to catch your full started again. Push your way to the force of life, but inside I didn't have the breath. It feels so strange. It feels so strange when it comes again. But I've got it now. Yeah, I've got the rhythm down. Shackles of end on end. And if one way stops, another begins. End on end. Down. I think I've got it now. Yeah, I think I've got it down. Yeah, I think I've got it down. It's end on end. Cycles begin. Cycles begin. It's end on end. It's end on end. Cycles begin.